There were no answers. There were no cures. There were only symptoms.
The doctor came in saying that
I did not know how much more I could take.
I might die.
I was worried, intrigued, and freaked out. I didn't know what to make of it.
All of a sudden, I had what the kids called psycho mom on my hands.
I was afraid it would get physical. She had a habit of throwing things, and I didn't want to be in that path.
My worst fear was that my daughter would die right then and there.
Next, two medical mysteries that defied the experts. Melinda Sagrestano has what at first seemed to be ordinary headaches, but they soon escalate into fits of pure insanity. With her family falling apart and her health deteriorating rapidly, Melinda makes a terrifying choice.
I decided I would rather die than live like this.
Then, just days after giving birth, Kelly Barbucio is blown away when her breast milk does something no doctor can explain.
It was the weirdest thing that I had ever seen.
In the spring of 1986, Melinda Sagrestano was living in Virginia with her husband and two small children. They were still in their early 20s and working hard just to make ends meet. But Melinda felt as if she had it all.
Life was incredible. I was extremely happy with my marriage, with being a mom.
My mom was really involved in our lives. She would take us pretty much anywhere that she went, as long as we were together.
But Melinda's active lifestyle takes a sudden turn when she's struck with what at first seems like an ordinary complaint.
One evening, I put the kids to bed, and I was actually sitting on the couch folding laundry, and I just felt a strange headache. It really caught me off guard.
One headache turns into two, then three, and over the course of the next month, they seem to take on a life of their own.
The pain was sharper, and it got to the point where I knew something wasn't right. I'd never had a headache that was this intense. I literally could not walk. When I would have to go to the bathroom, I would have to crawl because the movement of just walking and standing would intensify the headache. I did not know how much more I could take. I literally wanted to die. It hurt that bad.
Over-the-counter medications do nothing to dull the crippling pain. So Melinda makes an appointment with a family physician.
The first time I went to a doctor for the headaches, they done the routine examination. They checked my pulse, my blood pressure, my temperature. Looked in my ears, looked in my throat and said, "What's the problem? Eat right, exercise, everything will be fine, and quit stressing."
Melinda is blindsided by the doctor's dismissive attitude. But determined to find out what's triggering the agonizing attacks, she sees 3 more doctors over the next month. Each of them, however, assures her that she's simply stressed out. If she would just relax, the headaches would subside.
The only thing I took away was they don't get it. They're not listening. I became extremely frustrated. It got to the point where the doctors weren't going to help. No one understood.
Over the next 12 months, the vicious episodes take an enormous toll on the young mother. And she's devastated by the effect the illness is having on her family.
She used to be a really active person, and then she went to being immobile. When I would come home from school, I would find my mom laying on the sofa with a washcloth over her face, and that was the everyday norm.
I could not function as a person, let alone a mom.
I was 8 years old, and I thought, is my mom gonna die?
With her mother virtually incapacitated, Natasha begins looking after her 5-year-old brother. In fact, the 8-year-old soon takes over the running of the entire household.
From the time I came home, I would clean up the house, and I would make dinner, which was either noodles or sandwiches. I had to take care of everything. I didn't have a choice. We wouldn't eat dinner if I didn't make it.
Dealing with the pain And watching my daughter, I had two things I felt. One was total pride. The other one was guilt. Guilt's hard.
For 2 years, Melinda does what she can to cope with her pain. But then in the summer of 1990, a bizarre new symptom emerges. With the onset of each intolerable headache, her pulse begins to race out of control.
My heartbeat would be very solid. I mean, pound. And then it would increase in rate. You could feel it through your throat, and you could feel it in your eyes. And it felt like with every heartbeat, the whole top of your head was gonna explode.
Melinda does her best to explain the terrifying new symptom to her husband.
He would look at me and go, "This isn't you. Are you losing it?" He wanted to support me, but you can't support when you don't understand yourself.
He begs her to go back to the doctor, but Melinda refuses, convinced that another expert will simply dismiss her symptoms as stress. She's determined to fight the illness alone, even when things go from very bad to much, much worse.
I ended up with this sweating issue, and not just a normal sweat. My hair would be saturated at the roots, and if you wore makeup, what started off on your forehead ends up on your chin.
I remember her coming in asking me, "Are you hot?" And it'd be wintertime. You could just see her perspiring everywhere.
I actually went to the store once and bought like 16 different deodorants. And I would try each one for 3 days. And then I would trash it and go on to the next.
But nothing she does seems to alleviate the excessive amount of perspiration. Even during the winter, she's sweating like crazy, despite the fact that it's 35 degrees and all of the windows in the house are wide open.
And the rest of us bundled up in layers and gloves and being miserable. None of my friends would come and stay the night because they would always say that we had no heat in our house.
When they feel as if they can't take it any longer, the family once again pleads with Melinda to get some help.
I was really worried about my mom. She was really, really sick. I thought if she really wanted to help herself, she would. She would go to the doctor and get to the bottom of it.
So 8 years after the symptoms first began, Melinda finds herself back in a doctor's office looking for answers. But after giving her a thorough exam, he drops a bombshell.
He explained to me, it's a woman thing. It's probably time for estrogen, at which point, I'm 32, 33 years old. It's not time for estrogen. Something's going on.
His diagnosis pushes her over the edge. She leaves his office with few answers and even less hope.
I thought that was about as bad as it was gonna get.
Kelly sails through the pregnancy and grows more excited as her due date in July of 2007 approaches.
I was planning on not using any drugs when I finally had the baby and having just a natural birth.
But when she doesn't go into labor by her due date, Kelly's doctor orders an ultrasound. It reveals that the baby is breech and will have to be delivered by emergency cesarean section.
I was very upset. I didn't have any time to prepare for it. I was going to have to take all these drugs, and then the baby was just going to be kind of pulled out when he wasn't necessarily ready.
Kelly grows increasingly anxious as the medical team preps her for surgery with an IV, catheter, and an epidural.
The doctor came in and made me sign a waiver saying that I'm aware that I might die during this. I was very nervous.
Despite her fears, the procedure goes smoothly, and a few hours later, Kelly is holding their new son, Joey, in her arms.
They said you have a healthy baby boy and he's 7 pounds, 10 ounces.
I couldn't believe it that I had a son and that he was mine, and it's, the miracle of childbirth.
But when Kelly tries to feed her son for the first time, it's not the joyful moment she's been expecting.
I started trying to breastfeed the baby, and it hurt a lot. He was having a little bit of problem latching on. Every half hour, I would try again and again and again, and we had all different nurses coming in the room trying to assist, and it just wasn't working.
By the end of the first day, Kelly's breasts are engorged with milk, and the nurse suggests that she use a breast pump.
They said that it would help alleviate some of the pressure. So I said, okay, let's do it.
The pump does the trick for both mother and baby, and after 4 days, the Barbusios are discharged.
We went home and everything was fine. At that point, I was just really looking forward to being a normal, happy little family.
But the day after Kelly gets home, she wakes up feeling sick.
I felt like I had the flu. My whole body ached. I got a fever. I just felt very drained.
I remember thinking that when you have a baby, there's a lot of changes going on in your body. It's easy to get run down, and that could make her a little more weak and susceptible to something. We all thought it's just something that's going to pass.
But Kelly continues to feel weak and feverish. Then, a week after her release from the hospital, she wakes up to a shocking sight.
I noticed in the mirror some red marks on my chest. Streaks on both sides covering my whole chest. And I went and showed my husband and said, I have stretch marks.
We didn't know if it was because she was using the pump, but it was very concerning.
And the next time Kelly tries to pump, she encounters a distressing new problem.
I started having a lot of difficulty pumping to where I would be doing it for 45 minutes straight, and I would only get a half an ounce out. My chest started hurting and I would have deep, sharp stabbing pains.
Alarmed that she might not be able to feed Joey, Kelly immediately makes an appointment with the obstetrician.
I told him that I felt like I had the flu and I was very achy and that I developed stretch marks all over my chest and that I was having a lot of difficulty pumping, and the doctor felt at that point that I had mastitis.
Mastitis is a common infection in the mammary gland that often afflicts women who are breastfeeding. It can cause breast soreness, a red rash, chest pain, and flu-like symptoms. It can also clog milk ducts, making it difficult to nurse.
The doctor said to remedy it, I should start taking an antibiotic and put hot compresses on my chest.
The doctor assures her that the antibiotic is used by many nursing mothers and won't have any effect on Joey.
He said you'll start to feel better within a few days, so I was very happy.
Kelly returns home hopeful that the antibiotic will kick in soon. But nothing could have prepared her for what happens next.
I pumped the milk and the baby was asleep, so I put it in the fridge for when he woke up for the next feeding. And when I went back to get the bottle, the milk was hot pink. I was like, what the hell? It was the weirdest thing that I had ever seen.
For more than 8 years, Melinda Sagristano has struggled with a bizarre set of symptoms: debilitating headaches, rapid heart palpitations, and bouts of excessive sweat.
There were no answers. There were no cures. There were only symptoms. My husband grew extremely tired of watching me being sick. He really couldn't take no more. He didn't get it. He didn't understand the strain in the relationship. It was just too much. And so we finally ended up divorcing.
While she's devastated by the turn of events, it marks a turning point for the now single mother. And Melinda becomes more motivated than ever to get a grip on the mysterious illness.
I finally decided that I had to help myself. I accepted the pain as part of me being me. When you have something for so long, you adapt, and it really isn't abnormal anymore.
Slowly, she finds herself getting back into a routine at home. And after years of bad news, she finally has an unexpected reason to celebrate when she meets Steven Sagristano.
I was attracted to her right away. I noticed she had a really nice smile. She was somewhat of a pistol, had a real vibrant personality. She would talk about having attacks, and I didn't know if she was just embellishing a little bit until I actually saw it.
With Steven backing me and letting me know it's okay, I found another part of me that had been missing.
Steven soon becomes Melinda's lifeline, and a year later, they get married. Almost immediately, they decide to move with the children to Pennsylvania. It's a fresh start for everyone. Stephen finds work in the construction business, and Melinda lands a job at a local real estate firm.
I was enjoying what I was doing. And I guess I was living life in a way that I hadn't before.
Then, almost overnight, a disturbing new symptom threatens to send the entire family into a tailspin.
I would have major outbursts of pure meanness.
All of a sudden, I had what probably the kids called Psycho Mom on my hands.
She was the most angry person I had ever met. Any little thing would set my mom off.
I'd run across a picture or something, and it's like, I'm not worth this. And I would tear it up. It was kind of like a volcano getting ready to erupt. All the pressure there. And it would feel so good to let it out.
She would just bite my head off for no reason. I'd wake up, I'd make the coffee, I'd bring her a cup, and then she would immediately start yelling at me about I didn't need to be woke up this morning, or I did something wrong. And I'd be there saying, I didn't do anything wrong. What did I do?
I don't think that man heard I love you for 2 years straight.
I lost sight of not only who I was married to, I lost sight of where I was going. I was just very unhappy. And I probably had 1 foot out the door.
I went and stayed with friends because I was afraid it would get physical. She had a habit of throwing things, and I didn't want to be in that path.
My husband would always try to make sure that I didn't see my children. He wanted to protect them from me.
For 2 years, the family lives with her outbursts. But finally, it's Melinda who can't take it anymore. Convinced there is only one solution, she makes a desperate choice.
I decided I would rather die than live like this.
Ever since Kelly Barbucio brought her newborn son Joey home 12 days ago, nothing's gone smoothly. Joey can't nurse, and she's been diagnosed with mastitis, which makes it difficult and painful to pump milk. But now things have gotten really weird. Kelly's just discovered that the breast milk she stored in the refrigerator has turned an intense shade of pink.
I couldn't imagine what could possibly be wrong with it. I just couldn't even fathom that milk would turn hot pink.
We were just completely baffled by it. We didn't think that might have just been something that just happens when you have a baby. It doesn't look like a natural thing.
Mystified and alarmed, the family rushes to the pediatrician with Joey and a bottle of the pink milk.
And the doctor's response was, that's really weird. She didn't seem concerned about it. She had never heard of it before. The pediatrician said to keep feeding Joey the milk, it's the best thing for the baby. I was a little shocked. I wasn't really sure what to do.
The doctor assures Kelly the pink milk has nothing to do with her infection or the antibiotics she's been taking. Hoping it was just a one-time freak occurrence, Kelly goes home and resumes her feeding routine.
I tried pumping again and put it in the fridge, and it would turn hot pink again. Every single bottle would turn pink.
Soon, Kelly begins to develop her own theory. She wonders if the pinkness might be the result of an environmental contaminant, maybe a chemical leaching into the milk from the plastic bottle.
At that point, I called the bottle manufacturers thinking that the bottles must be defective.
But the manufacturer insists that they've never heard of such a thing.
They said they were going to send new ones out. They didn't have any other suggestions. They said that was the weirdest thing they'd ever heard.
Not sure what to do, Kelly switches Joey to formula, but she keeps pumping so her milk won't dry up. Then, one day as she's bottle feeding her son, a disturbing new development emerges.
Every 2 hours, he would drink a bottle. I'd just set them all in the sink to wash. And within a few hours, I had about 10 pink bottles. It was like the Twilight Zone. It would be like if you woke up one morning and your hair was purple for no reason, and it kept happening every morning.
More baffled than ever, Kelly begins contacting specialists across the spectrum, from pediatricians to OBGYNs to epidemiologists.
They all had the same reaction, which was, I've never heard of such a thing. That's very strange. There was no conclusion.
At that point, I was worried, intrigued, and freaked out. I didn't know what to make of it.
On top of it all, Kelly is still battling severe mastitis. And although she's been taking antibiotics for several weeks, the mastitis appears to be getting worse and is more painful than ever.
Dominic would want me to hold the baby, and I just couldn't. My chest hurt so badly. The red streaks on my chest were getting worse. The clogged ducts were getting worse.
It wasn't getting any easier to pump. She would just be rocking herself and groaning and twisting in pain.
At the end of her rope, Kelly schedules an appointment with yet another OBGYN to see if he can help with the chronic mastitis. She isn't expecting anything new, but this doctor drops a bombshell.
The doctor said, I think this might not be an infection. This might be breast cancer. I was very afraid at that point in time. I thought that Dominic would have to raise Joey by himself and that I would never see the baby.
The doctor explains that the red streaks on Kelly's chest could be signs of inflammatory breast cancer, a rare and extremely aggressive form of the disease.
Inflammatory breast cancer is not good. That's one of the ones that are higher risk. A lot of people don't survive.
I was supposed to be this happy family life, and everything's supposed to be great, and everything's going the complete opposite direction. Every day and every week that went by, it was getting worse and worse.
The next day, Kelly undergoes an ultrasound to help determine if she's developed the life-threatening disease.
Kelly was very nervous, and she was asking, do you see anything, and how does it look?
Kelly and her mom anxiously look on as the doctor methodically goes over every inch of Kelly's breasts.
She said that she felt that everything was fine with Kelly and that she did not have breast cancer.
Relieved, Kelly returns home, but as far as her condition goes, she's back to square one.
I was still feeling really sick. The milk was still turning pink. I had no answers. And then I started having a lot of problems breathing.
When I got there, Kelly was lying on the couch. And I noticed that every few words that Kelly said, she would have to stop speaking to get a breath.
My mom decided that we should call an ambulance. I couldn't even walk to the bathroom because I couldn't breathe.
My worst fear was that my daughter would die right then and there.
For more than 12 years, a mysterious illness has slowly drained Melinda Sagristano of any desire to live. And when doctor after doctor dismisses her symptoms, she feels there is only one option left.
I got in my truck. I drove up the road to this beautiful big high school we have. And I punched that truck with everything it had in it. My intentions were to drive straight through the middle of that school. Nice, big, solid brick building that would kill me. And I was around 80 miles an hour when a car pulled in front of me. I locked up on the truck. And I didn't die that day. I felt like I'm such a nutcase, I can't even commit suicide right.
Melinda sits slumped over the wheel, distraught by how much she has lost and how much more she nearly risked losing. She decides to use her last bit of strength in an effort to rebuild her family.
I had to get my life back, and I had to find a way of dealing with the pain. I had to raise my children. I wanted to be mom again.
Determined to find out once and for all what's causing the crippling headaches, bizarre heart palpitations, incessant perspiration, and uncontrollable fits of rage, Melinda picks up the phone book and makes an appointment with the first family practitioner she comes across, Dr. Mark Sussman.
Melinda came because of a variety of reasons, and she wasn't quite sure exactly what was going on.
He actually sat down and he listened. What my concerns, my worries.
Dr. Sussman gives Melinda a thorough head-to-toe exam and almost immediately realizes that Melinda's blood pressure and heart rate are elevated.
Certainly high blood pressure can cause one to have headaches, but the reality is many patients have high blood pressure and they didn't have the personality changes that she had. So we did a cardiogram to rule out that there was any cardiac disease or heart disease that might predispose her to her rapid heart rate.
But when the findings are in, Dr. Sussman finds himself at a loss for words.
The cardiogram was normal. There was, no abnormalities.
He looked at me dead in my face and he said, I don't know what it is, but if you hang in there with me, we'll find out.
The only thing he can do at this point is give Melinda a prescription to help control her high blood pressure and encourage her to check back in if anything changes. For Melinda, it's another in a long line of setbacks.
I had to turn within me to find how I'm going to cope with this. I had to mentally depend on me.
It takes everything in her just to get out of bed each day and take care of her family. But over the next 6 months, Melinda's symptoms go from debilitating to life-threatening.
I gave up saying it can't get no worse because I realized it could. I went from 128 pounds, slowly dwindling away, to 92 pounds.
She would go out and buy new pants every so often, but you would tell that they're hanging off of her.
She was getting pale. She was thin. She was deathly thin.
At the age of 40, my mom looked like a woman that was near her 60s. Her hair was very thin. She had skin just hanging off of her bones. It was really frightening.
At that point, I knew I was looking at death.
She had to find out why she was losing weight. She needed to do something to fix the problem.
Stephen insists that she check back in with the only doctor who ever seemed to take Melinda seriously, Dr. Sussman. So she makes an appointment for the following week. But 2 days before she's scheduled to go in, there's a frightening new development.
I went to scratch my stomach, and underneath my ribs, I felt this lump. It was a good-sized lump. I knew when I felt it, that wasn't where it was supposed to be, whatever it was. So I called Dr. Sussman.
Dr. Sussman tells her to come in immediately. One look at his patient, and he knows Melinda is gravely ill.
Melinda's weight normally is probably like 115, 120. So when you're 90, 95 pounds, you've lost a significant amount of weight. When a physician sees that, and especially in a relatively young person, we're looking to try and get to the specific diagnosis.
Dr. Sussman examines the bizarre protruding lump located under Melinda's left ribs and finds a growth the size of a grapefruit.
It prompted me to, order a CAT scan.
When they done the CT scan, I kept saying, okay, girl, cross your fingers. Even if it's malignant, let them find something. Just let them find something.
When I got the report from radiology, it was like everything came together. I had a suspicion to what the problem might be.
Ever since giving birth 2 months ago, 30-year-old Kelly Barbucio has been plagued by strange problems associated with breastfeeding. She has developed a severe case of mastitis that won't go away. The breast milk she's been pumping keeps bizarrely turning bright pink, and now she's having trouble breathing. Terrified, Kelly and her mother are rushed to Poudre Valley Hospital in an ambulance. At the ER, she's met by emergency medicine specialist Dr. Eric Olson.
She seemed to have a lot going on. She seemed to be under a lot of stress. She was breathing fairly rapidly, hyperventilating. There's something about Kelly and her very complicated history that got my attention. In other words, there was more than meets the eye.
Kelly walks Dr. Olson through her various symptoms, the fevers, chest pain, and the strange red rash on her chest.
She said that on top of all of this, when she pumped her breast to make bottles for her new child, that her breast milk was turning pink. That was unusual, and not a lot of things do that. I asked her that if she had ever had her breast milk cultured. She told me she had not had this cultured. I assured her that we would at that time.
Kelly pumps her breasts, and Dr. Olson immediately sends the milk off to the lab for testing.
Dr. Olson told me that usually it takes 48 hours to grow out, and then as soon as they had their results, they would call me.
2 days later, Dr. Olson calls Kelly with the news she's been waiting for since her son was born.
Based on Kelly's symptoms and now the culture result, I thought it was quite clear that she had an infection that was caused from a bacteria called Serratia marcescens.
Serratia marcescens is a highly mobile bacteria that lives in warm, moist environments. It's found in most people and is usually harmless. But given the right conditions, Serratia can thrive, multiplying to the point where it overwhelms the body's defense mechanisms. If left unchecked, it can spread through the bloodstream, triggering potentially life-threatening complications.
Serratia is one of the unusual organisms that actually produces a pigment. This pigment tends to cause the reddish, pinkish tint that often accompanies Serratia infections.
Dr. Olson explains that it takes time for the bacteria to react to the air and temperature change. That's why Kelly's breast milk looked normal at first and then turned pink.
It's the bacteria itself which produces this pigment called prodigiosum. And so as the bacteria continues to replicate and produce this pigment, her breast milk would ultimately turn pink.
When he told me that, I was shocked. I was very happy that he finally found out what was wrong with me.
But Kelly can't help but wonder how it got into her system in the first place.
Serratia is one of those organisms that's actually found just about everywhere. It's a normal bacteria within our GI system, but there certainly are instances where instrumentations can introduce that bacteria into a person's system.
Since I had had a C-section, I probably got it from one of the catheters because it can live on catheters.
In addition to turning Kelly's breast milk pink, the Serratia was also at the root of her chronic mastitis.
In Kelly's case, it was likely the Serratia that was causing the infection, which led to the chest pain, the swelling and the clogging of her lacrimal ducts, the discomfort, and the rash that she was experiencing.
Her infection lingered because the Serratia was resistant to the antibiotics Kelly was taking. Dr. Olson goes on to explain that her breathing problems may also be traceable to the Serratia.
One of the common places that Serratia tends to colonize in people is in their lungs. Serratia could have had something to do with her breathing problems.
The fact that the Serratia was in her lungs means it was probably also in her blood. And if it had persisted much longer, the results could have been devastating.
It could have started causing multi-organ system failure. You have a lot of organs that are so overcome by either the bacteria themselves or the toxins which the bacteria produces, so that the organ is not able to continue with its normal function, and it can actually die. We call that multi-system failure.
If Dr. Olson hadn't discovered what was wrong with me, I could definitely have died from it.
What really stuns Kelly, though, is that Joey is testing positive for Serratia too. She'd passed it on to him unknowingly while she was feeding him the infected breast milk. Finally, it's clear why the formula in his bottle was also changing color. Joey was contaminating it with his saliva when he drank.
That was the worst news, to hear that he had what I had, because it was so debilitating for me, and he was just a little baby.
My worst fear was that he might not make it.
Finding a treatment for Kelly and Joey is imperative, but it's tricky.
It's resistant to a lot of antibiotics. Fortunately, with most culture results, the bacteria is tested against a number of different medicines to tell you what it's sensitive to and what it's resistant to.
After several rounds of testing, Dr. Olson finally hits on a particularly strong antibiotic that he feels has a good chance of killing Kelly's serratia.
Within a couple of days, I started noticing the red streaks were going away. My breathing problems went away. My body wasn't hurting anymore, and I felt like a normal person again.
But Joey's treatment is far more complicated.
Because the antibiotics were so strong that in babies, it can cause blindness and permanent disabilities. They said as long as he was still growing and gaining weight, they wouldn't treat him.
You don't want to hear, just wait it out and see what happens, because it could be fatal.
So Kelly decides to take matters into her own hands. Researching bacterial infections on the internet, she stumbles onto a probiotic supplement that she hopes will naturally replace the unhealthy bacteria growing in Joey's system.
A month later, I had him recultured and it was completely gone.
With the crisis averted and Kelly back to feeding Joey breast milk, the family can't help but wonder why no one was able to link the mastitis and the pink milk to serratia.
Serratia tends to be found more commonly in certain areas, the urinary tract, the respiratory system. Having serratia in breast tissue is really a rare finding. The literature has very few references to any serratia mastitis. In fact, the only references of serratia causing mastitis tends to be in goats and cows.
But Dr. Olson is optimistic that the serratia is finally gone for good.
Since we've treated the infection, the likelihood of recurrence is not very good. It would basically be the same as mine or anybody else's.
More than 16 years, Melinda Sagristano has been living with a bizarre set of symptoms that no doctor has been able to diagnose. But when a CAT scan reveals an abnormal growth in her abdomen, Dr. Mark Sussman believes he may have an answer. In order to confirm his hunch, he needs to run a highly specialized urine test.
And we ran to check her hormone levels. I was mainly interested in her catecholamines.
Catecholamines play an important role in the body's physiological response to stress. The most abundant catecholamine is the hormone called adrenaline. So, if her catecholamine levels are high, she will most likely have an elevated amount of adrenaline in her urine as well.
She collects the urine over a 24-hour period. It's sent to the laboratory, and they assess whether or not these catecholamine hormones are present.
The wait is almost unbearable, but when the findings come in, Dr. Sussman knows he's cracked the case.
I can't recall any other patient where I have seen levels as high as hers. So I knew that Melinda had a pheochromocytoma.
A pheochromocytoma is a tumor located on one of the adrenal glands, which sit on top of both kidneys. In healthy individuals, the adrenal glands produce adrenaline to help maintain blood pressure and cope with stressful situations. But in patients like Melinda, a tumor develops on one of the glands, causing an overproduction of adrenaline.
Melinda's symptoms, when one puts it all together, she had frequent headaches, rage, frequently perspired. She had a loss of weight, high blood pressure, fast heart rate. These were adrenaline-like symptoms, and Melinda was getting this because she had a tumor that continuously produced these hormones.
I am not nuts. There's something wrong with me. Everything that I had went through for 16 years was because of one tumor.
But while she's incredibly thankful to finally have a diagnosis, Melinda isn't quite ready to forgive the doctors who repeatedly dismissed her.
Sometimes when I think back about this 16 years, if one doctor would have traded in, quit stressing, for a CT scan, my life would have had a whole lot more joy in it.
Because the adrenal gland is hidden, it's not anything that will cause any mechanical obstruction or obvious symptoms. Frequently, it is not easily diagnosed. This is the only case of pheochromocytoma that I have seen in my 38 years of practice. It is such a rare situation that many pheochromocytomas aren't diagnosed till autopsy.
One thing is clear. Melinda is extremely lucky that her condition was diagnosed when it was.
If a patient does not have surgery and they have an active pheochromocytoma, they usually develop really uncontrolled blood pressure. This eventually would have led to Melinda's death.
But the surgical procedure to remove the growth is also very risky.
When it come time for surgery, I was scared to death, not because of the surgery. I didn't care if I lived. I only wanted to live if I could be me.
Melinda's entire family gathers at the hospital, and as she's wheeled into the operating room, they begin a seemingly endless wait.
I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't focus. I just sat there and I prayed.
With each passing hour, their anxiety seems to build. Finally, 8 hours after the operation began, the surgeon emerges from the OR with the news they've all been praying for. The tumor has been successfully removed, and Melinda is in stable condition.
I was much relieved. I knew that it was an uphill ride from there.
When I woke up and I realized that headache was gone, it was like breathing fresh air for the first time. I was reborn.
Today, Kelly is fully recovered, and the Barbusios are finally getting a chance to live the life they always dreamed of.
Kelly, after that, she's back to her old self. She's just happy and excited, and it's good times over at our house.
I've been Serratia-free for 16 months, and Joey has been Serratia-free for about a year.
But as physically and emotionally painful as the experience was, it's given Kelly a new sense of empowerment.
The lessons I learned from this were to stick to what you think and not give up. Because if you know there's something wrong with you, there's something wrong with you, no matter who tells you there's not.